Now let's come to our own oil supply. And NNPCL has been receiving some bashes since they released this report acknowledging recent reports regarding the company's significant debts to petrol suppliers, which has placed considerable pressure on the company and poses a threat to the sustainability of fuel supply. This is contained in a statement that was signed by the Chief Corporate Communications Officer of NNPCL, Mr. Olufemi Shonaye. A company, however, it says, assures Nigerians that in line with the Petroleum Industry Act, the PIA, NNPCL remains dedicated to its role as a supplier of last resort, ensuring national energy security. They're actively collaborating with relevant government agencies and other stakeholders to maintain a consistent supply of petroleum products nationwide. Now, of course, you have seen the petrol queues everywhere. I know when this started, even on Business Morning and other program, Business Incorporated, we had analysts who say that this was because of debts being owed to suppliers that has disrupted supply of petrol, PMS. But the NNPC had not either spoken or affirmed that. And so now they tell us, after weeks of queues on the road, that they're being owed. So is this, I wonder what we should be expecting following this. But we've seen an intensified queue. I don't know if you've been out there this morning, you would see that the queues have intensified, obviously, with this news that they shared yesterday, this statement they shared yesterday. Nigerians have become more desperate. And of course, the filling stations themselves, I'm sure they also do some other things about this. Not a very good thing. We know in Libya, when a couple of days of a shortage of supply, the head of the state oil was sacked. Well, I guess that hasn't happened now. Obviously, also following these former candidates of the People's Democratic presidential candidates, Atiku Abubakar has asked NNPC to list. I don't know on our programs here, we've discussed the issues around inefficiency running NNPCL. That's weighing, we had that conversation on Friday, weighing the country down. I wonder if we would find solution to all of this in the nearest future. Now let's discuss this and other issues with Mr. Ojo Demezwe, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Managing Consultant and Chief Executive Officer of Flame Academy and Consultant Limited. Mr. Demezwe, good morning.
Morning, Ini. Nice to have you again on this show. And I'm sending you greetings from the city on 1,000 hills.
Yeah, Mr. Demezwe, you're not seeing our queues. You're in Rwanda, but I know your family is here.
I felt the queues, horribly before I left a few days ago. We are all in the same mess together, and we're hoping that God will save us through a renewed and a born-again NNPC.
Yeah, I wonder what you think a born-again NNPCL would look like. But first of all, this admittance, after a lot of analysts have pushed this out there, what does it mean really? Does it mean that since they're saying that it's supply costs, should Nigerians be expecting that price of PMS per liter will increase? I know we've paid up to 1,000 for a liter, but at the NNPC stations, we've still been doing 568, at least in Lagos. Should we expect an increase following this admission of debts being owed to suppliers?
Well, the unfortunate reality is that Nigeria is getting refined petroleum products at much, much higher price than we all think or we are all made to believe. Because as Naira continues to depreciate due to the fact that we know that FX inflow has exacerbated or got worse because of the FX issues we are facing. The reality is that the subsidy we were told that was gone has not actually gone. And, to save face, NNPC and, of course, the federal government have found it very difficult to own up to the issues that we're facing. So you now find that NNPC, when they make money from the royalties and taxes from the IOCs, the international oil companies, they end up, wasting the whole money in trying to import the same products, the refined product. And hence, not only are they having challenges getting this product down to Nigeria, we're also having challenges getting funded as a nation, having revenue gaps because of NNPC's major role in supplying government with that kind of revenue. So we have gone from a point where they were claiming there was a supply chain gap. That is, we were hearing mother vessel to daughter vessel issues and all kinds of things. And now the reality is facing us, that the price of this commodity, a very important commodity in every nation of the world, the price is getting worse and worse, and is hurting the state-owned, even though now private major dealer in that product. How do we move forward? Do we go back to engaging major oil and gas trading companies like Oando and the rest of them, who also have the capacity to find these products and then find a decent and transparent way to handle those gaps in prices? Because in my own view, it might become very difficult to increase prices again right now, even though that's the eventual reality. But because of the way the subsidy was removed quite suddenly, even though it's a very bold policy that we must commend this government for, but there were not structures on ground to remediate or soften the effect on people. We have thought that by now, government should be engaging seriously with all the labor groups and everybody to see how can provide reasonable palliatives. For example, apart from allowances and minimum wage that has been done quite commendable, even though some of us have our opinions about that amount of 60,000. How can federal government, use some of the gains we've got so far, gains in quote, because it's still a net loss? How can we use that to bring the cost of transportation down? Because the major mode of transmission to inflation is cost of transportation. Energy cost, brings about, and not just transportation, but energy usage in the country. But if you want to deal with the transportation, how can government begin to work with private sector to provide incentivized movement, low-cost movement, apart from train, but buses in all 774 local governments in this country, adequate routes being covered, and of course with the other systems we have in place, there won't be excessive cost of movement. But once that happens, even the Gary producer, the farmer in the village will double their prices, which is what we've been experiencing so far. So while NNPC is dealing with this price issue, let's engage on these palliatives before we can now expect that the prices held at 568 or so by NNPC, and of course 600 and something and more than that by other stations, can begin to moderate or be discovered at a better level. So it's a big challenge, quite all right, but I know that NNPC can do it if we begin to think Nigeria right from this moment.
Okay, think Nigeria, NNPC, but you talked about the alternative and the palliative, but also we also see economic climate investors moving their capital away from carbon-heavy industry like traditional oil and gas and away from Africa. Sadly, in addition, as a result of, you also have the issue of course, oil thefts, destruction of distribution pipes, insecurity, intractable community problems. We've seen IOCs divest from their onshore and shallow waters. So this, of course, is another aspect to look at. But I mean, we also have this applaudable thing that Oando just did, acquiring or completing the 100% acquisition of Ajib. And we wonder what this part of the scenario can do to help this challenge that Nigerians are facing at this time.
The Oando deal to acquire the Eni's Ajib Oil Company, that's Nigeria's Ajib Oil Company, NAOC, is a landmark development that if our government, our political leaders can harness that opportunity, the whole oil and gas landscape can change for the better. I know a number of deals are in the offing, but Oando has shown foresight, clear vision, right from the past 2 decades. They have consistently positioned themselves to invest more and more in the oil and gas sector, particularly in the upstream. And that was a clear vision they expressed. When they acquired ConocoPhillips in 2014. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Ademizu, I can hear you.
That story of it's a story, that confirmed that if you are, a visionary and you stay focused on what you want to achieve, you may have troubles in between. But if
all right, it does seem like we're having a little bit of technical issue with Mr. Ademizu. Let's take a break.